everybody, it's Mr. Wagstaff. Today we're going to be talking about kind of the last finishing touches of what finishes up in World War II, and then begin into what the repercussions are of World War II that will lead up very much to present day. Alright, so one of the most important things to be discussing here in World War II is the understanding of what happened with the Holocaust afterwards. Alright, man, this is some big time stuff. So, remember, the Holocaust... let me get my feet right. So, the Holocaust is like one of the most evil things, if not the most evil thing that's ever happened on Earth, especially in the fact that it happened in a democracy, in a modern country. So, people just ignored any rumors about it during World War II. It didn't make any difference in World War II because nobody believed it was actually happening. Now we're at a point in history where the war is over and they realize that the Holocaust has happened. How do you respond to that? There are punishments to be had. So here's what happens at the very end of World War II. The war is over. Everything is done. How do we move forward knowing that the Holocaust has happened? So the world is horrified by this. They cannot believe that this happened, and people are going to be held responsible, and people are disgusted at Germany for letting this happen. And to a good extent, rightfully so. This is a democracy, you know. So what's kind of surprising to everybody is Germany's reaction to it. Germany just is furious, but they're like furious at themselves for letting this happen. So they loved Hitler. They thought this guy was doing great. Almost instantaneously that the country realized what Hitler had done, they're going to turn against him. Like, even though he's dead, they're going to turn against him and be the adamant against Hitler than anywhere else on Earth. Like, nobody hates Hitler. It's a present day. Nobody hates Hitler more present day than Germany does. And a lot of that comes from the anger at themselves for allowing him to come to power. There's a lot of... So instead of just brushing it off and pretending like it didn't happen, like America and the Native Americans, where we just seem to want to ignore this horrible thing that we did because that was so long ago, whatever, just moving on. Germany doesn't tend to do that present day. Germany fully embraces the fact that they're responsible for this. And rightfully so. So when this happens, Germany comes out and is like, hey, can we punish everybody that was involved? And the rest of the world's like, no. Like, clearly you're just going to let them all off the hook. And Germany's like, no. So the Nazi political party, the guys that were in charge of this, absolutely horrific people. Clearly, had we known what was happening, we wouldn't have let it happen, all this other stuff. We need to punish the people that were in charge of this, and we need to punish them firmly. How about we do this? How about the rest of the world allows Germany to put these people on trial? If the rest of the world feels like we are not doing a correct job, we are letting people off easy or anything like that, the rest of the world has like a veto button on anything that we do to where they can swoop in here and change all the outcomes of these trials. We allow that to happen, we being the rest of the world, allow Germany, all right, with the oversight of the rest of the world to put these people on trial that were responsible for the Holocaust. And they're going to be called the Nuremburg Trials. Germany doesn't play around with this. Germany is very, very firm on this and does a good job. And this is the outcome of the Nuremberg Trials, I think, is what changes the perspective of Germany. That Germany isn't just saying things to like not be held responsible. Germany takes the other approach. Germany fully takes responsibility for what happened and are horrified by it. So the Nuremberg Trials, what happens here, all right, is 24 of Hitler's men go on trial, all right. Let's see what I got here. I got a photograph here. A lot of these are a lot of Hitler's chieftains. It's like an international tribunal. So there's countries from all over the world. They're asking questions and everything, facilitated by Germany. So Nuremberg is a big city in Germany. So that's why it's called the Nuremberg Trials. That happens in Germany. You can see them wearing headphones because there's a lot of people talking in different languages and they're getting translated. But so I can't go through myself and point out which one of these guys is what turd bag. But there are a bunch of them here. So there's 24 of them go on trial. 24 of them are charged with crimes. They're the guys who like came up with the idea of the concentration camps and all these other stuff and made the decisions and gave out the orders. Of the 24, 12 are sentenced to death and 12 are sentenced to life in prison. So you're like, life in prison? Like what? Just take them out back and put them down. Like this is the Holocaust we're talking about. Their life in prison was solitary confinement for the rest of their life with like 1 hour of sunlight a day, like 1 hour of getting outside and no human contact for the rest of their life. So I'm not completely sure that that is better than a quick and painless execution that the other ones received. So the 24 guys that get put on trial, they are felt with firmly. The real question is, there's thousands and thousands of soldiers who ran the concentration camps, that murdered people, that put people in ovens, that gassed hundreds and thousands and millions of people. And they all get to go free. And there is this huge outrage at first, all right, over how in the world can you let that happen? Those guys were on the front lines murdering people. And so this is where it gets crazy and it changes our concept of human nature on what humans will or won't do. Every single one of these men they interviewed and they said, why did you do that? Like, and they said, I was given orders. And they're like, yeah, but you knew it was wrong. And they're like, I'm trained not to question orders. I'm just supposed to do them. Like, what am I going to do? Like, just not do it? And they're like, yes, you don't just murder people. And that's what we genuinely believe in our heart of hearts. Like everybody watching this believes if somebody tells us to go kill somebody, we are going to say, no, that's wrong. And here's where it gets mind-blowing. So when every one of these soldiers said the same thing, I mean, and they're traumatized for life. Like the PTSD, the trauma, the suicide rates of the men who ran the concentration camps is astronomical. Even during, like, while it's happening. It wasn't like it grew when they got caught. They are relatively normal people. And they just kept doing horrific things. And so everybody they interviewed kept saying the same thing. I was just doing what I was told. So the question becomes, will a human being do what a superior tells them to do, even if it's morally wrong, even if it leads to somebody dying and knowing that you're going to kill them in advance? The crazy response to that is yes, humans will. And so they do these experiments, and I really, sometimes in class, I'll take a whole day to talk about this. They're called the Milgram experiments. Milgram. You can go Google it after this, and it will blow your mind. They take college-age kids, all right, and they put them in a room, and they convince them that they are shocking somebody in another room, and they can see them, all right? And there's a guy in a lab coat, and they're getting $50 for signing up for this like experiment. They're like college students. Hey, $50, I'll do it. And every time the person in the other room keeps getting a question wrong, the shock gets higher, administered by the college kid. All right. On the dial, it literally says fatal. Like, so the more questions they missed, the more you're supposed to shock them, go all the way up to fatal. The person in the other room is screaming, begging, please stop. I don't want to do this anymore. And there's a guy in a lab coat next to you, like, no, he signed up for this. You go ahead and keep shocking him. The vast majority of humans will take that dial all the way to fatal. And they redo these experiments all the time. They still do them present day, and people will still do it. Of course, what they don't realize is in the other room, the guy's not actually getting shocked. He's just an actor. The question is, how far will the guy over here, right, that got paid the $50 and just showed up for a random experiment, will he, if somebody in charge tells him to do something that is morally wrong, if the person who's being told to do something morally wrong is being told to do that by somebody they view as an authority, will they still do it? Yes, they will. There is a small percentage that won't do it. That'll say, absolutely not, this is wrong. They'll get up and they'll storm out. We all believe that is us. All right, I fully believe that's me. I would be like, no. But everybody believes they're that person. Everybody does. And it's really crazy to see how that happens over and over and over. So When Germany keeps hearing that they're just following orders, they go start doing these experiments to see, is that really what human nature is? And they find out that it is. At this point, can you execute people for human nature? You can't, all right? Because what these guys are on trial for is crimes against humanity. They had to like create an entire new category that you can hold people responsible for war crimes after the fact. And they're called crimes against humanity. If you're just following human nature, that's not a crime against humanity. So that's why there's 24 of them. And these are the guys who came up with the ideas and the organization like below Hitler. So they are the ones that are punished very heavily. But the Milgram experiments, it's really baffling. In psychology and sociology, I would imagine they talk about the Milgram experiments pretty extensively, and they still do to today. But if you want to go Google it, there's tons of information on it. I'm not going to take up a whole day talking about it, but that's the type of logic that takes place and why the only people that are really being held accountable for the Holocaust are the guys that were in charge. Now, if you're a law following, people need punishments, understand that those men who worked in those concentration camps lived a nightmare the rest of their life. The horror, like not only were they already traumatized, to understand what they had done, because they're just soldiers that signed up. They're soldiers that they're not sociopaths. They didn't volunteer to do that stuff. So they were the ones that existed, led something worse than a prison inside their soul the rest of their life, knowing what they had done to innocent people. But so the Nuremberg Trials kind of set the precedent that what you do during war, we're not just like when the war is over, be like, okay, moving on. You can be held responsible for the crazy stuff you do during a war, after the war. This is the first time this has really happened. And it was because of the Holocaust was so extreme. So they changed it. It's called Crimes Against Humanity. You are responsible for stuff you do during war now. Like afterwards, if you did messed up stuff, you can be held responsible for it. They're called war crimes. This is a video of it. It's real short, I believe.
It is the sentence of this tribunal that the defendant, Erhard Milch, be confined to the Rebdorf prison for the remainder of his natural life.
People have heard of the Nuremberg Trials. Now, that was an international military tribunal, and that was convened to try the top honchos. These were Hitler's chieftains. The Nuremberg Trials received mammoth press coverage. These were, after all, Hitler's chieftains on trial.
All right, so as the war finishes up, talk about some of the stuff that's going to happen in the United States after the war and how society is going to start fundamentally changing. One of the big things, keep in mind, right before World War II, America's in the Great Depression. So after after World War II, America's out of the Great Depression. Everybody had tons of jobs because you had to build all this war stuff. Now you have millions and millions of men coming back into society. And what are you going to do? Just throw them back into the workforce? There's not enough jobs because there's not going to be as many jobs because it's not a war economy anymore. You have all these extra workers. The big fear was, what if we end up going right back into another depression? All right, we don't want that to happen. So the United States government creates the GI Bill of Rights, which is still around today. It's pretty cool. So what it does is when soldiers come back from war, all right, when they show back up from war, here's their options. They can, you can just go on to try to find a job and everything else, or the United States government will pay you to go to college. All right, so you basically can go to college and it's paid for. It's free. Now keep in mind, not a lot of people went to college back then. This is the 1940s because it was crazy expensive. However, now, when you get back to the United States government will pay you to go to college, and so it's free and everything. Like you can, a lot of people did this. If you want to go create your own business, the government will give you like 0 interest loans and stuff like that. A lot of things to help people transition back to civilian life. But the GI Bill of Rights, as far as education goes, is fundamentally going to change America. You have a whole generation of men and women, I believe, because they have the same. They would have the same benefits. So yeah, a whole generation of young Americans that go become college educated. Very quickly, guess who becomes the most educated country on earth? That's America. Not surprisingly, you're going to see innovation and all types of stuff really take off. I mean, these are the people that are going to be directly responsible for flying a spaceship to the moon. Like the education that America receives here really sets us a cut ahead of everybody else. So the GI Bill of Rights does a good job of educating an entire generation of people in the United States. But the main goal here is to help soldiers transition back to civilian life, because you just release millions of people back into the workforce. It could be really detrimental for the economy just recovering from a Great Depression. All right, James Farmer. So James Farmer, this is really interesting. There is some discrimination taking place in America, as we have talked about. So segregation and stuff like that in the United States. James Farmer is really the first one to come out at the time and say, this is some bull crap. So this is really the very beginning of the American Civil Rights Movement. And the reason that is we had just fought a war against Hitler because he was a racist and he tried to do all, and the Holocaust is fresh in everybody's mind. Everybody's like, racism is bad and you can't do all this other stuff. Like, that's awful. So the war's over. Everybody comes back home. And black people had gained a whole bunch of rights in World War II with the Tuskegee Airmen, the Buffalo Soldiers, and everybody kind of realized racism is dumb. Then they come back to the United States and black people start being treated as second-class citizens all of a sudden again. Like, oh, we're going to go back to the way it was. Black people were like, nah, we've moved past that. We all came together for that war. We're not going back to being ranked differently, especially if we just fought an entire war against racism, which is how they're associating Hitler at the point. Absolutely not. We're not going to do that. So James Farmer creates the Congress of Racial Equality. It's called CORE. All right. So the North was segregated, like Harlem and New York and all that was segregated. He is going to aggressively come out and fight against the racism and the segregation in the North. It is important to point out that this is focused at the North at the time. The South, still pretty aggressive to the point where it would be dangerous for James Farmer to do any of this in the South in the 1940s. He absolutely could have been murdered because of the racial tensions that exist in the South. The North, while there's still racial tensions, you're not really worried about getting lynched in the North. In the South in the 1940s, you still would be. So the South is a longer process to get the civil rights movement up and going there. But it really begins here with James Farmer in the North. This is a picture of James Farmer, who created the Congress of Racial Equality. All right. Internment camps. This is really important to talk about. This is wild. So I hadn't really mentioned it very much during World War II because I wanted to spend some time here to talk about it. So as soon as December 7th, 1941 happened in America, American citizens turned against Japanese people. All right. Anybody of Japanese descent in America was viewed as an enemy since Japan attacked us. All right. Even though the vast majority of Americans that were here were called Nisei, which means that they were native-born Japanese people. So both their parents might be of Japanese descent, but they're born in America. Like they've never been to Japan or anything like that. Some of them are 2 or 3 generations removed from ever having been in Japan. But there's this massive racism against Japanese people during World War II. And it just ramps up. It just keeps growing, this racism against Japanese people. So Japanese people, because if you look at a map, China and Japan are are on our west coast. So the large population of the Japanese people that are actually here are going to be on the west coast. There's not a lot of Japanese people here on the east coast. So the Japanese people on the west coast are really discriminated against. During World War II, and this is wild, during World War II, the United States government allows, at the pressure of the racism of the American people, to go around and round up people of Japanese descent based on the color of their skin. All right. Now, like what they're half white, half Japanese. That really wasn't that common. Mixed races really is not that common that time. So it would be on a base by base situation. but Japanese people of Japanese descent, these are American citizens, keep in mind. They're not immigrants. They're American citizens that were born here. They are rounded up, all right, and taken from their homes during World War II in America and gone and put in what's called internment camps. These are not concentration camps, all right? Basically what an internment camp is, they go out in the field and fence it off. It's a lot like 5 square miles of fenced off space, maybe not even that much. And they build these little wooden houses all inside it, so Japanese people have to stay inside the fence during World War II. They're not allowed to leave. There's this fear that they're going to be spies. So they round up the Japanese people and they put them in these internment camps where they have to stay for the entirety of World War II. There is this fear that Japanese people are spies and will sell out America for the Japanese, even though they themselves are Americans, and there is zero evidence that there's ever was or ever would have been anything to verify or validate that fear. So they're rounded up and they're put in these internment camps. If you were Japanese American, you owned a car or you owned anything, it was taken from you. So when they take you from your house and put you in these internment camps, your car, your house, anything that you own, your business, the United States government goes and sells all of that, and they keep the money for the war effort. At the end of this war, when the Japanese people are released, they don't get any of that back. Like, these are American citizens that are being put in prison, more or less, minimum security prison. They can't leave. If they try to leave, they'll get shot. They're put in these minimum security prisons because of the color of their skin. Clearly, this seems to violate about every part of the Constitution. So, not surprisingly, it gets taken to the Supreme Court. In a Supreme Court case called Korematsu versus the United States. He is like, that's wrong. All right? You know what the United States government says? Nah, we think it's needed for safety, so we're going to do it. And they validated it. It's still in our record books in the United States. They could do it again. If we go to war with a country that you are from 5 generations ago, you could be rounded up and put in a minimum security prison because the United States government says, in time of security, that's possible. Like my last name is of English descent. Lord knows what I actually am. Wagstaff is an English last name. Technically, if America had Revolutionary War number 3, War of 1812, I count as number 2. In theory, they would legally have the right to put me in jail until that war is over and take all my stuff and sell it. They could legally do that because that's on the record books. It is baffling that was allowed. They end up suing the United States, and in 1988, they get $38 million in compensation. The entire race of the people in America get $38 million, which is less than 1/10 of the amount of stuff they lost in the 1940s. Absolutely baffling. The internment camps and the fact that we allowed that to happen in America and are unapologetic for it is just absolutely insane for a country that prides itself on freedom and equality for all and all this other stuff. But we constantly have stuff like this, and we have stuff like segregation, and we have things like that. And it's like we turn a blind eye to some of the shady stuff that we do, while we have all types of wonder. We have no problem pointing to all the wonderful stuff that we do, and we do a ton of wonderful stuff. But we do turn a blind eye to the shady stuff we've done in the past and do very little to fix it or prevent it from happening in the future when it comes to civil rights. There's a video on that.
The attack on Pearl Harbor unified the country in many ways, but it also stirred long-standing prejudice against Japanese immigrants in America. Bowing to political pressure, President Roosevelt ordered the immediate relocation of over 110,000 Japanese Americans to remote detention camps. They were forced to abandon or sell their homes and businesses, in some cases, overnight. Many lost everything. More than 70,000 of the relocated were Nisei, Japanese Americans born in America and citizens of the U.S. Despite the unfair treatment, the interned Japanese Americans did their best to make the camps tolerable and remain loyal to the United States. Many Nisei even became U.S. soldiers. Regrettably, more than 100,000 Japanese Americans spent the entire war in detention camps.
Alrighty then. This is just a poster of basically what it's telling the Japanese Americans. I won't read it to you. If you're interested in reading it, you can pause the video and take a gander at it if you can see it. But it's just wild that this happened in America. It's a picture of what some of the internment camps would look like. And then these red dots here are where the biggest internment camps are. Most of them are on the West Coast because that's where the biggest population of Japanese Americans were at. All right, so what we're going to start talking about now is what's going to happen with the Cold War after World War II. All right, so this picture right here, this is a crazy picture. I say crazy because there's a story behind it. So I don't know if you've ever seen this picture before. You may not have. If you've never seen it, well, welcome to history. This is a very famous picture in American history. There's statues of this picture. So this was, I believe this is Manhattan. I believe that's the city. It could be Boston. This is everybody's getting home from the war, and everybody's super excited. This is like a sailor and a nurse kissing, and people happy in the background. Everybody's like, war's over. This is the picture that was on the front page of all the newspapers at the time. All right. So when the guy took the picture, it doesn't get their names, so it becomes a super famous picture. And then like a couple days go by, weeks go by, like, man, we didn't even get those guys' names. They realize this picture's gotten super famous. So they're like, all right, let's go find out who they are. And nobody comes forward to tell you who it is. Like, nobody does. And it gets kind of weird, but it's like, okay, that's fine. Like, we're going to make statues and stuff of this picture because it's such, and this is a statue and stuff. So it's kind of been a big mystery. Like, we don't know who it is. Like who are these lovebirds? Everything is great. So the story takes a unique turn. Long time later, I want to say this could have been late 90s or early 2000s, like 60 years later. So there has been guys that have come out and claimed they are the guy, but they've been able to disprove that they either weren't even in the Navy or they weren't there on the day this was taken. So that there's no way. So the guys that have claimed to be the guy have been disproven. No woman has claimed it. So a woman, when she passes away, all right, like her obituary, her family comes out and says, "Hey, my mom, that was my mom." So this is so the adults are like probably in their 60s at the time, and then the mom, she would have been about 90 and had passed away. And they're like, yes, so my mom, she told us in her will that she was this woman and wanted to be our decision whether or not to tell the story. So and they did, and everybody took it, and I think anyway, let me back up. So in the 1940s, so she's a nurse. She is sitting here waiting for her husband to come off a ship. And she's standing here, everybody's partying. She is waiting for her fiance. Sorry, I believe it's her fiance at the time, of getting off a ship. Now, this is the 1940s, and things are a little different. So as she's sitting here waiting for her fiance to get off the ship, some guy gets off before her fiance, and he's like, "Woo, America, we did it!" And he just grabs her and kisses her. She has no idea who this guy is. Like, she just grabs him. Like, after you've seen this picture, oh, cool picture. Look at her body language. Her arm is down by her side. She's like, "What are you doing?" Like, and so he grabs her and kisses her, and then just sets her back up and just wanders off and just goes. And she's like shocked, and she's still waiting for her fiance. Now, keep in mind, Great Depression, families falling apart, all this tension. This is the 1940s. You don't tell somebody that you went and kissed somebody else. So when her husband got off the ship, or her fiance, who will eventually be her husband, who will eventually she'll have kids and everything with, that she just doesn't tell him. She just, like nothing happened, and just goes on. She starts seeing this picture in the newspaper, but there's no identifying marks on her. Like, her face is covered. And she was like, "Is anybody going to notice this?" And it never gets brought up. All right. So like, her husband wouldn't have ever, like, even though he was there when this happened, that he was like, I mean, I didn't randomly kiss anybody. Like, I didn't, that wasn't us. So her husband would have never said anything. She never said anything. So as they get older, she like keeps this like locked down as a secret, so it doesn't like hurt their family, even though she did nothing wrong. That was just the times. So her husband passes away before her. And then she, at this point, is like, by the time she could tell everybody, it wouldn't be a big thing. And then it's like this big secret that's like she felt awkward about. So she left it in her will for her family to tell them the story of what happened, and they can do whatever they want with it. And the family thought it was super cool, and they weren't offended or anything by it, her kids. And they went, and it might have even been her grandkids that have come out and told everybody. So we know who she is now. We still have no idea who that dude is. So we've had a lot of people claim that they're him. But anyway, so cool story with this random, very famous picture in World War II. It's kind of a sexual assault now by our classification, so now it doesn't seem cool. The story's interesting, but now it's like, oh, so there's like big old statues of this, and now we're like, oh, maybe that's not the best thing. All right. So Cold War conflicts. This is going to be a really intricate part of the rest of this course. All right. We're going to have a lot of beef real early on with Russia, all right? So if you remember, we had mentioned that at the Yalta Conference, one of the rules was we were going to create the United Nations. Every country on Earth is going to create and join this organization called the United Nations, and you're going to talk things out. This is still around today. It's extremely important today. So if you got beef with somebody, you show up at the United Nations and you yell at them in front of all the other countries, and they meet multiple times a year with delegates. Sometimes the smaller countries will send like their actual like president or leader, and they will speak. Big countries like America, like Donald Trump would go, who's the president of the United States now, he would go if needed. All right, like if there is a reason he could go, but typically what America does in the bigger countries, we have delegates whose full-time job is to like represent America at the United Nations. So while it seems like they would have a lot of power, and they do, they're extremely well respected because they have a direct line with the president of the United States. They don't like make decisions really as much as they're just they represent America. Whatever like the president wants to do, they represent his ideas. It's kind of like a lawyer, like you hire a lawyer to represent you. The lawyer doesn't like make up their own stuff to do. So the United Nations, bigger countries usually have representatives that represent their country, and they're very powerful because they have a direct connection with the leaders. And then the smaller countries, typically their actual leaders will show up. Started in San Francisco, 50 nations came together. Today, every country's in the United Nations. There are some asterisks next to that, like North Korea and stuff, but we'll talk about North Korea and all that. That's a whole nother thing. But it got created. Russia and America both joined it. That's really important here. I'll pick a video here.
In February 1945, 3 months before the defeat of Germany, Allied leaders met at Yalta in the Soviet Union to discuss Europe's reorganization. Other post-war plans were laid at the conference in Potsdam, Germany 5 months later. The closing months of the war also saw the birth of the United Nations, an international peacekeeping organization to succeed the League of Nations. The United States was changed as well. The weakness of war-ravaged Europe and the growing threat of the Soviet Union led the U.S. to a new role as the world's leading economic and military power.
All right, so I had to turn on my iPad here. I want to explain something here. I should have put this on your notes, and it's not. So since I got a blank screen here, here is the strength of. Don't be weird. Why can I not do that? Gee willikers. I can't just draw on this? Why can I not? Hold on, let me pause it, see if I can draw on it. Alright, I figured it out now. Alright, so this is, as I said that, maybe I'm not. Hold on. Okay, let's see if we can now. So, United. This is getting silly. Let me go to a blank slide then. I said really, that's gonna be the thing. I wonder. Hold on, I know what it is. Silly. All right, let's see if the 10th time is a charm here. Sorry about that. All right, so there's something you got to understand about the United Nations and how it works. Going into this, so it's called the United Nations Security United Nations Security Council. Really, really, really important. All right. So this is called the, hold on. You know what? Sometimes I'm better at being competent than this. UN, because the United Nations calls you UN Security Council. So here's what's important. So the big mamma jamma that the UN has is they can declare war on a country, meaning every country on earth can declare war on one country. Here's how it works out, though. This big junk right here is a big old circle, all right? So the UN Security Council, in order for the United Nations to declare war on one country, it has to be a unanimous decision. Well, there ends up being hundreds and hundreds of countries in the United Nations. If you have to declare war on somebody, there's no way it can be a unanimous decision because obviously one of the countries you're declaring war on is in the United Nations. So somebody's going to vote no, and then therefore you don't have a unanimous decision. So the power to declare war comes from 5 countries. 5, all right? 5 countries, and they agreed to this in 1945, and it's still how it is today. If these 5 countries decide to go to war, the entire world declares war on whatever country they decide. Now, so the UN Security Council is no joke. These are the 5 countries that choose whether to go to war or not. All 5 of these, if all 5 of these countries agree to go to war, the entire world has to go to war. Now, in order to do that, they put a bunch of powerful countries on the UN Security Council, and they're permanent. They don't change. And they don't necessarily get along. All right? They do this, and they put them on the UN Security Council so that if these countries that don't like each other, if they all agree somebody needs to go to war or somebody needs to get attacked, they probably do. So here's the, see, I'm doing my really awful pie chart here. Oh, that's really bad. That's actually not that bad. I've done worse. All right. So here's the 5 countries that are in the UN Security Council to present day that can determine whether or not the whole world declares war on somebody. Not surprising, one of them is USA, America. All right. Then you got England and France because they always get to be at the big kid table. France always, for some reason, I don't understand. But all right. So England, France. The next one, not surprisingly, is going to be Russia. Now, Russia's the Big Mac Daddy. The fact that the United States and Russia will never agree on anything, and we're going to talk about the Potsdam Conference, that really makes tensions between Russia and the United States skyrocket very quickly after World War II. United States and Russia will never agree on anything ever. But if a situation happens where Russia and the United States both agree that a country needs to be attacked, they probably do. So the fact that it makes it very difficult for the United Nations, the UN Security Council to agree actually helps world peace. All right. And then the last one, since people are now more aware of Asia, and Asia is 60% of the world's population, and you don't have a single Asian country represented here, who gets to represent Asia here in the UN Security Council? Now, it's not Japan. Japan has been nuked. One of the rules of Japan, they can't have a military anymore. So Japan isn't going to be in the UN Security Council, and they themselves don't even have an offensive military anymore at Japan after this. So it makes sense, let the biggest country in Asia represent here, and that's going to be China. Now, we're going to talk more about this in the coming units and time about China. China at the time is nationalist type of government. They are not necessarily a democracy, but they're not communist either yet. But these 5 countries are part of the UN Security Council. If they all decide somebody needs to get attacked, then they get attacked. And that's what happens. We're going to reference this again, especially when we get to the Korean War, which is going to happen in the 1950s. All right. So, this is a picture of the first group of people getting together and agreeing to the United Nations. This is a drawing of the United Nations. Like, so everybody's like trying to work together, like kind of like playing a game together here, playing poker. But everybody's trying to be shady and do what's best for them. But at the end of the day, they are all at the same table together, which is a step up from just not being. All right, the Potsdam Conference. This is really, really important, and this is going to change the outcome of the world quite a bit after this. So this is right after Potsdam Conference happens right after World War II. This actually is going to take place before the atomic bombs get dropped on Japan, but after Europe has surrendered. So that gap between when Europe is over and the atomic bombs get dropped, we meet, and now we already have this thing set up at the time that Russia's supposed to be helping us out and invade in November. So Russia shows up, so we have another meeting. So we had agreed at the first time, hey, we're going to let Russia have some stuff, but you have to let them have elections and things like that. So we show up to fine-tune what we had already talked about at the Yalta Conference a few months before. Well, it gets really weird at the Potsdam Conference, which Potsdam is another city in Germany, is where they're meeting at. This is the photograph at the Potsdam Conference, all right? So you got Clement Attlee here, Harry Truman here, and Joseph Stalin here. Notice they're all three sitting down. Guess who this is out of respect for? It's for FDR. Now, FDR had just died shortly before this picture, and Harry Truman is the new president, so he's representing America. And then you got Clement Attlee. Clement Attlee is the new Prime Minister of England. It's kind of hard for people to understand what happened in England right after the war. So present day, England loves to have these like votes, like who's the greatest Englishman of all time? You know who wins hands down every time present day when they still do this? Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill gets the credit present day in England for leading England through World War II, defeating Hitler, having the resolve and doing all this stuff. People love Winston Churchill in England. Right after World War II ended, or VE Day, all right, like a month or two later, they have an election in England, and Winston Churchill runs for re-election, and he runs against Clement Attlee, and Winston Churchill gets destroyed and is voted out of office, and Clement Attlee is now in charge. And the rest of the world's like, oh, y'all love Winston Churchill. Why would he get voted out of office? Like, it doesn't make sense to us. But you have to understand how it is viewed in England. So in England, they were sick and tired of war. Winston Churchill is a great wartime leader, but we're not in war anymore. We don't want him anymore. So they vote him out so they can bring in a peacetime president, Clement Attlee, because they associated Winston Churchill with war, and they're tired of war. So Clement Attlee comes in. So at this meeting of the big three, England, Russia, and America, the only person that showed up from the last time that was just a couple months ago was Stalin. Stalin shows up. Now, Stalin's a dictator. He's there for life. And Stalin says something that ticks everybody off, and it's going to change the direction of our relationship. Not that it was ever great. So we show up, and Truman's like, all right, Stalin, so we had talked about you having these elections in these satellite countries, these countries you're going to own. Let's talk about how that's going to work out. And Stalin looks him dead in the eye and says, no, I'm not going to let them choose whether or not I get to own them or not. I get to own them. And Truman's like, no. You promised America that you were going to let them choose for themselves if they want to get owned by you or not. And Stalin says, I didn't promise them. And I think Stalin truly believes this, all right? Stalin says, I didn't promise America anything. I promised FDR because I respect him. He ain't here no more. Therefore, our agreement doesn't matter. I'm going to own him. And he breaks his promises from the Yalta Conference, all right, and just says he's going to take over everything that he can. Tensions between America and Russia at the Potsdam Conference skyrocket. And this is even before the atomic bomb. So this adds to our whole concept of why we wanted to keep Russia out of the war is they're just going to they're going to just grab for any land they can get. So this also adds to why we were going to drop the atomic bomb to keep Russia out so they don't take all the stuff in Asia, which ends up being a complicated event when we get there. But the Potsdam Conference, Russia breaks his promise to allow these countries the choice on whether or not they want to be owned or not, and it's going to cause a bunch of tension from here on. All right, that's as far as we're going to get today. See you guys.